Hello friends and gamers, and welcome back to the Fortress. My name is Jinx, and today we're looking at the Prestige or Campaign Awards for Japan for Global War 1936 version 3 for the Tournament of the Spring Offensive 2021. So the campaign medals, as you know, are 3 ribbons that attach to your chest, and it's a way of keeping track of which tournament a person attended to, what their accomplishments were within that tournament, and what nation they played, if the alliance that they played with won or lost, or if that individual played more than one nation. You know, if the character happened to be playing 3 major powers, then it's represented on there as well. It's a way of keeping track of things, of people's reputation, and it's a way of being involved in the community, so people are interested in coming back year after year, of collecting these awards and medals, and I, for one, am super excited about it. For me, I'm just absolutely, this is going to be a fun part of it for me. It's always nice to be recognized for a person's accomplishments, and this is part of that as well, so fantastic. Alright, so the campaign ribbon is set into 3 parts. A campaign ribbon, which will be unique for each tournament, a prestige ribbon, which will kind of keep track of your accomplishments, a tier 1 star is usually attainable, a tier 2 star is a job well done, a 3 star, having 3 stars on your ribbon is exceptional work, and tier 4 stars is rare and astounding achievement. So I only want one person, or 1 or 2 players out of a game to actually have 4 stars whenever they walk away from it. The national ribbon shows which nation was played. It will have a gold or silver star for 1st and 2nd place, and a blank for for 3rd place. It may further have an oak leaf to represent if you played 1 major power or 2 major powers and such. So I'm posting this on YouTube to get feedback from the community, because the way my brain works isn't the same as everybody else's, and I want to get the best minds at it. And I think by all of us putting brain power into it, it seems to work out that I have a better result out of it, a more acceptable result as well. I want to thank my contributors and feedback, the people who've been feeding back to me, and it'll be Edelwolf, Liam Borowski, Trig, and Madman Dan. You guys have been very helpful to me in helping sort out the good and the bad, and rewording things a little bit differently, and making things work. I know without you guys I probably would be stalled, and it would take me a couple more weeks to get this figured out. With your guys' help, I've shot through this fairly quickly, and I really do appreciate it, guys. Thank you. So one thing I want to note, that the rest of this video is all about prestige ribbons and how to get those prestige stars on there. The idea there is you have 3 options for a tier 1 to get that tier 1 star, 3 options for a tier 2 star, etc. And so I want to ask the community for your feedback on what you think of these different things, if the ideas are good, bad, or should be thrown back on the chopping block and dealt with. And yeah, and you guys have been very helpful in that. So you guys all know the drill, so I'm going to dive right into the tier 1 stuff. The Kantokuen, I don't know, I try to pronounce the Japanese, the Kwangtung Army Special Maneuver. Get a prestige star if, at the end of the Japanese turn, the USSR and the Chinese KMT, CCP, and warlords do not possess any units adjacent to any non-island land zones with a Japanese printed roundel. So it's basically anything around Japan printed roundel. So that would mean a few territories. Let me get some paint here. That would mean these territories here. Japanese printed roundel mean Peking and Soyan, as well as Chita, Amur, and Primorsky Krai, Vladivostok, and not including North Sakhalin and South Sakhalin. Those are excluded from it because they're island territories. The idea there is you could eliminate these guys without even going to war with them, just with Soviet-Japanese border clashes back and forth until you wipe them all out. And these ones you could just wipe them out inevitably when you go to war against them. I wanted to include Mongolia, but I don't want to, because that means you'd have to get the Americans at 2d12 increase to their income. So it's just border clashes and this one here. A fairly easy tier 1 objective to accomplish. Next up we have the Indies campaign. This used to be tier 2, I dropped it down to tier 1. Gain a prestige star if, at the end of a Japanese turn, Japan controls all the land zones of the Dutch East Indies. So that would be the Dutch East Indies. I thought maybe I should clarify what they are, but I think most people know that these are the land zones of the Dutch East Indies. That's simple as that. So a person doesn't need to go for both these, the Kwangtung Special Maneuvers or the Indies campaign, but one or the other should be good. Likewise, the Sleeping Giant is coming up. Namutu Iru Kyojin. Gain a prestige star if, at the end of the Japanese turn of July 1941, which December 1941 is when Pearl Harbor occurred, Japan is not at war with the United States. So you get a prestige star. If you haven't gotten either one of these, you might get a prestige star by delaying the Americans from going into war. And the way you'd have to do that is either the Americans are unlucky with their dice rolls, or you haven't been too aggressive and haven't built many capital ships or gone after the Indies or whatever, something along those lines. This one I don't see it happen too often, but I thought it was a cool idea to include for an easy or kind of tier 1 prestige star. Moving on to tier 2, the Sino-Japanese War. Gain a prestige star if, at the end of the Japanese turn, Japan controls all land zones with a printed Chinese KMT, CCP, or Warlord roundel adjacent to a sea zone. So that would be these ones down here. These are printed roundels with the Chinese area, as well as these ones up here and to Peking. So a little modest grab over here, kind of a historical grab of what they achieved, and that's for a decent tier 2. It is a tier 2 difficulty. It's not horribly hard, but it does get hard if you fight in the mountains quite a bit or if you postpone it too long. So that's an easy tier 2. Next up we have the Kentai Kessen, Decisive Battle Doctrine. Gain a prestige star if at any point during the game Japan concludes combat, attack, or defense with an enemy fleet with any combination of air and or naval units, and Japan eliminated more enemy capital ships during the course of combat than Japan itself has had eliminated. The wording on this is a bit much, but I wanted to try to narrow it down as much as possible. Japan concludes combat, maybe that's resolve combat, might be better, with an enemy fleet with any combination of air and land units or air and naval units, and eliminated more capital ships than they. So I thought that would be one thing to do. Now this one is a hard tier 2. I think it could be a hard or easy tier 2 because this doesn't necessarily exclude the USA either, or sorry, Britain either. If you manage to catch the FEZ forces, you could wipe them out this way as well and still get this tier 2 prestige victory. So it could be difficult, but it could be hard, and it's kind of dependent on the USA. Japan has this issue where a lot of things can be easy early on in the game, but a lot of other things are hard. So it's like you could do almost every single thing throughout the course of the game. You could invade Australia, you could invade Calcutta, you could take out, Hawaii. You may even be able to, take out all of China, but you can't do China as well as Australia as well as Calcutta. It's like you got one shot at one of these things that you can do well, and the other one you could kind of half-ass it, but you can't do everything. So next one up is Kikaku AU, or Operation AU. I don't know why I keep trying to pronounce the Japanese. Gain a prestige star if, at the end of the Japanese turn, Japan controls all the following land zones. All Japanese home country, so the Japanese home islands, all land zones with an IPP value with an Anzac printed roundel. Japanese home islands are, of course, these puffies up here, and not including Okinawa, which is fun and good. And the Anzac territories with IPP are, New Zealand, Sydney, New South Wales, Queensland, as well as New Guinea. Those are the required territories to grab. Not horrible, but you still have to do it, right? It still takes a little bit of effort. That's what, 1 in 5 territories, and at the end of a Japanese turn. So theoretically you can do it. You don't have to hold it for a full turn, but you have to be able to grab it. So that takes care of the tier 2 stuff. Moving on to tier 3, Operation MI. Gain a prestige star if, at any point during the game, Japan controls all or most of the following land zones for a full game round, from the end of the Japanese turn to the end of the following Japanese, except for 5. So all land zones with a Japanese printed roundel, that's quite a bit. That's including Manchuria, some of the small islands as well, Attu and Kiska Island, Midway, Wake, and Mariana, Gilbert, Solomon, Fiji, and New Hebrides, New Britain, New Guinea, and Dutch New Guinea. Let me paint that out for us. Give it an orange color. So that would be these puppies right here. New Hebrides and Fiji. I believe Solomon are on there as well. Yeah. Fiji, New Hebrides, and wherever Gilbert is, right here. And now we also have all the Japanese territories, so all Marshall, Caroline, Palau, Volcano, Bonin, basically everything across the entire map. And we need the Mariana, the Wake, the Midway, and Attu and Kiska Island. That's a mountainous territory up there. Yeah, we have it all. So that's what we need. And we need all our regular territories too, South Sakhalin, Kuril Islands, Manchuria, Korea, Formosa. So we need all our territories too to get this. The good thing about it is we only need it at one point during the game. At any point during the game, the exception is 5. So even if you get it at the end of the Japanese turn, but you have to hold on to it for a full turn as well. So that is a trick. You could possibly grab all these territories, but can you hold them for a full turn? Now the exception is 5, which is kind of high. But on the flip side of that, the Americans are really going to be breathing down the Japanese neck trying to get rid of this. So let's try to take out 5 that are nearby. Gilbert, let's say Wake, Midway, Attu and Kiska, and Marshall. Let's take those off the list, and you'd still manage to get it. You'd still manage to get it by holding on to everything else, and I mean Dutch New Guinea, New Britain, New Hebrides, Fiji, like stuff really close to Anzac territory, as well as some of this stuff this stuff that's kind of insignificant. But you get the picture. It is a bit of a challenge to grab all this and hold on to it. It's not a huge challenge, but it is difficult. Now, there's other stuff a person could do, like maybe throw in New Caledonia. That might be worthwhile just to make it a little bit more difficult. Or reduce, instead of New Caledonia, reduce it from 5, reduce it down to 4. Now, America has their own objective. Since Japan has to hold on to all of these territories, or all -5, yeah, all -5, maybe we should throw in Aleutians Islands as well, all -5. So at the end of the game, America has to have all of these islands -2, and those two are probably going to end up being either these ones, or Okinawa is probably going to be one of the ones that the Americans don't go after, just because it's, they get a defensive +1, and militia only costs $1 there. So I suspect the Americans aren't going to go after those two, but everything else they have to recapture back. New Hebrides, Solomon Islands, Fiji, Gilbert, Marshall, all this stuff. So you'll have an island hopping campaign, which will be very interesting. I think oftentimes prior to this, most games I've just completely bypassed a lot of the islands and just wham, try to go straight from there without worrying about any of this stuff down here. So it'll be fun to see if there's actually an island hopping campaign in this. The reason they did island hopping campaign, of course, is because there's fog of war and you don't really know what's there, and you have to kind of hop to kind of build up your base and then hop to build up another base. In this game, there's no incentive to do that. There's no fog of war and no forward basing. There's no naval port where you have to be within a range of 3 of this port or something like that. No, it's all, you could just bypass everything straight for Japan if you want to. So I think this would be an interesting incentive. Operation MI. And then Chongqing campaign. So this name is not ideal either. As somebody pointed out, Chongqing is not quite where I thought it was. But that's the initial operation. That would have been the last operation Japan tried to do in China. That's the reason I named it the Chongqing campaign. We could, of course, named it something else like Operation 2 or Operation 16. For the record, most of the stuff here is actual historical names of things. There's a few like Indozi campaign. I didn't, that one I made up more or less. This one here is made off of a speech from an American movie, and the guy probably didn't even say it. The rest of this is fairly like historically accurate. Anyways, did we cover it? Yeah, okay. The Chongqing campaign. Hold on to everything except for 3 territories. All Japanese home country, all land zones with a printed Chinese KMT, CCP, Warlord, Round L. So on the map, that's actually a chunk of territory. That's a chunk of territory a person has to grab. Let's grab this color now. Okay, so all Warlord territory -3. Now, I'm going to just paint in the exceptions because this is a hard one for Tier 3 to do. I was talking with Rank Carcass about this and saying, like, I've played anywhere between 15 and 20 games, which is not necessarily a lot, but it's a chunk of games. And I would say, 15, let's say I take 15 games. Let's say it's 15 games I've played. I bet you 10 of those games I've played as the Axis, and I bet you in 8 of those as the Axis I've gone into Japan. Usually there's not enough, well, okay, let's say 5 of those I've played as Japan. So out of 8, 5 of them I've either played all the Axis or just Japan, right? So in the 5 games I've played against Japan, played as Japan, let's say 2 games I haven't gone into China, or 1 game I haven't gone into China, but the other 4 games I have. And in my experience of going after China, and not all of it's been going after in the sense of like trying to wipe them out, but I've never managed to wipe out China, and never been even close to that. So out of those, say, 4 games I've gone into China, yeah, I'm usually, by the time usually the CCP usually gets wiped out, but not always, but Yunnan always survives, and it's usually the line is somewhere around here or here, somewhere there. Yunnan usually survives, Japan usually grabs all these territories, CCP usually survive there. It's just, at that point, Japan says, there's money down here to be had, and they go in that direction instead of pursuing them here. So I think it is a worthwhile Tier 3. Now, anything Japan sets their mind to, if they want to take out Japan, they probably will, if that's their primary goal. If they want to grab all these islands, they probably will. If they want to grab, Australia over here, they probably will. They just can't do China and Anzac territory and India. It's limited. at the same time while trying to fight the Pacific in the Pacific against the Americans. It's limited to what they can do. So I think it's a worthwhile tier 3. And so the exception I have, long ramble there, but the exception I have is 3. So my thinking there is for an exception of 3, there's one territory here in Yunnan. Let's change up the color. One territory here in Yunnan that the CCP or the Chinese can hold, and then either the CCP territory here gets avoided, but then you still have to go back in the backwoods and grab all this stuff. So I have a 3. So let's say it's this one, and then you need, say, Tibet. But that still means Japan has to grab all this stuff. So instead of Tibet, say, let's say Xinjiang. So you still have to go deep into Chinese territory to grab that. And if it's not CCP territory here, then it would be Yunnan, Tibet, and Xinjiang, because Japan doesn't want to go to Xinjiang because it might give the USSR a boost to their income. So it's still a lot of territory Japan has to grab. It's basically backing up the Chinese right here to the wall and trying to get it. Now I could change it to just an exception of 2, but even then, like I said, in most of my games, China is never fully wiped out. The Yugo Offensive. Gain a prestige start if at any point during the game, Japan controls all the following land zones for a full game round, from the end of the Japanese turn to the end of the following Japanese turn. All Japanese home country, 4 city land zones across the entire map. Annam Tonkin, Cochin China, and Siam, British Malaya, Burma, Bengal, Benares, and Calcutta. So where is that? So 4 territories across the map. Let's grab red. So let's say it's Peking, Tokyo, Nanking. We need one more. And so the one more could either be Calcutta itself or Hong Kong over here. So that makes it a little bit more difficult to grab and to hold on to. You can't just completely bypass for over here. You have to grab some of the Chinese territory to make it worth your time. Now, you could, of course, instead of Hong Kong, go for Calcutta. Another alternative is if the Japanese player doesn't want to go into China, so then he has to pick up those 2 city territories elsewhere. And so he could do Sydney over here, and then he would have to do Calcutta here. And that's basically gives an option for the player not to be forced to go into China. You have this alternative means, but you have to take out Hong Kong in that case, which is pretty hard. Okay, Annam Tonkin, Cochin China, and Siam is over here, British Malaya, and then you also need to grab these territories here, including Benares. Now, Benares was a last-minute choice because I thought, Calcutta should be sufficient, but I wanted Benares because Benares is inland, and that means that Japan can't just grab it all in one fell swoop. It has to actually spend a second turn to grab Benares. And at that point, in the meantime, the USA player might make a landing, on the Japanese home island, or perhaps the British come in from the south and re-grab, Bengal or Burma or British Malaya or something along those lines, or Australia is recaptured, perhaps. So that's the idea there with that one, and that's the Yugo Offensive. So the Yugo Offensive is difficult. I think Operation MI is the better way of going because it's more historical. You have more wiggle room. You don't have to fight as many people. And so people tend to go the more historical route, which is good. I want people to kind of lean in the direction of history. Okay, moving on to Tier 4. The Great East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere. You have to end the game with all or most of the following territories, barring 3. All land zones with IPP value with a Japanese printed roundel. All land zones with the Chinese, KMT, CCP, or Warlord printed roundel adjacent to the sea. Hong Kong, British Malaya, Burma, and Sarawak. Annam Tonkin, Cochin China, Siam, New Guinea, Philippines, and all Dutch East Indies islands. Basically, almost the historical extent of the Japanese Empire before it shrunk. So all of this, right? I could draw it all out, but it's going to be a lot. Burma up to here. I know they didn't quite get into Burma, but you get the picture. Siam, and all coastal regions adjacent to, or all Warlord, or all Chinese adjacent to the coast. So the historical extent right there. Now, they might also have Sarawak as well, and the Philippines. Yeah, Sarawak and the Philippines. So that's nice, and that's nice. So you get the picture. A lot of drawing on here at this point. Okay, next up, we have the Kikaku 21. So at the end of the game, 4 of the land zones included below can be omitted. All land zones with the IPP value, with Japanese printed roundel, or with the FEC printed roundel, or Anzac printed roundel, as well as Annam Tonkin, Cochin China, and Siam. So that's basically a focus. Instead of having the Chinese territory here, I wanted to allow the player to, if they so choose, to bypass going into Chinese warlord territory, just like it happened in Operation Winter Solace, and not force them to fight them to get that tier 4. And instead, so that changes the focus to grabbing all FEC territory worth a buck. So that's this down here, right, like that. It means Hong Kong as well. It means British Malaya as well as Siam. Yeah, as well as these guys right here. Boom. As well as the, what is it, the Dutch East Indies? No, they're not included in this one. As well as these territories here, worth $1. So yeah, it ends up being a bit that they have to hold on to and grab. And that's a tough one. That one I feel could be a little bit harder. The fact they have to go after Anzac territory really extends you quite far, and at that point the Americans might come in here and grab one of your territories worth $1. Now you also have an exception of 4. You have to keep in mind that this one here is worth $1 as well in the Marshall Islands, so that's going to be very exposed. And if you go all the way down here and try to secure that, you might lose something up here, and the Russians might put pressure on you up there as well. So you get the picture. It's difficult to hold all of that. Theoretically, I could include all of the Dutch East Islands as well, but I think it's difficult enough even at this stage. Like on some level too, having done this, you have wiped out the FEC and you've wiped out the Anzac. You know, if you've done that, that's actually pretty decent work that you've done, right? You wiped out 2 opponents at that point and still have the Americans to deal with. Like, that's decently difficult to do. So, and you have to hold on to the Philippines too? No, maybe I should include the Philippines. They seem to be kind of prominent and right there. So I think that makes sense. Now, let me know if what you guys think about this one. I think it needs to be upped a little bit by the inclusion of the Philippines, but that's about it. Another factor I can change up is instead of an exception of 4, I could drop it down to 3, and that makes it all a little bit easier. Not much, but a little bit easier. Sorry, a little bit harder with less of an exception. Now this 3 I put up on here. I think the reason I put up a 3, yeah. The reason I put up a 3 is because there's going to be some pushback from Chinese forces coming here as well as Americans, so I think the 3 is a good amount over here, and over here 4 is probably maybe a bit too strong. I might drop that down to 3. Anyways, thank you all for watching, and please let me know your feedback. This map is just not covered with markers everywhere, but you kind of see the perspective of how things are, and also it helps you too to see in correlation with the USA, you know, what they have on their objectives, you know, holding on to this sea zone with a couple of capital ships, until they're at war with a major power, and also grabbing all these islands over here, liberating things, and they're going to be definitely going after the Dutch East Indies too. One of the American MI things is going after the Dutch East Indies, so they're going to put some pressure down here as well. Also, the British have an incentive to hold on to one of these territories in the Dutch, let's call it in New Guinea, I guess, in either Dutch New Guinea or New Guinea, so there's going to be some push over here as well. And that's about it, guys. So thank you all for your feedback, and please leave some comments below and tell me what you think I should change, or if you think this is good to go. Now, when you give comments and say you should add this or you should add that, please recommend one that you would like me to remove, because it has to go in correlation with something else. If you think something should be removed, or something, if your proposal has more merit or a better idea than what we have existing here, then I'd like to hear it, and it'd be good, you know, if you figure the idea is that good. And I'm fully willing to accept that other people's ideas are better. Fantastic, guys. Thank you all for watching. Cheers.